Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the studio. Tonight, no shortage on content, but shortage on time. As you've seen Sunday's video, we are preparing for the Southeastern Mini Nats, the 30th Mini Nats. That's taking up a lot of my spare time, and trying to do YouTube full-time and or work full-time is tough. So a little short tonight. We're going to try to paint a body for Wednesday night's video, but my computer's still giving me a little trouble, and I haven't taken time to mess with the Cricut machine yet. I know it's pretty simple, but I just hadn't had time to even look at it. So tonight we're going to tear into this old Composite Craft TRC Lynx II. We're going to get that thing torn down. We'll go over what our plans are and how we're going to go about restoring things. We're going to try to leave it mostly stock. Only thing I may upgrade is obviously electronics, because it don't have any. It's got a motor and a servo in it, but we're going to have to upgrade that. And new tires, obviously. Tires are toast. And we're going to race that thing. I got a body ready for it. I do have to paint that body. So hopefully by the time I get around to painting that, I'll have it figured out where I can cut some more mass. So anyways, stay tuned. Let's dig into this thing. All right, before we get too far into this, let's go over what we got. This car is an Elite. The only difference between the Elite and the standard, the Lynx II Sport, the Sport came with a solid beam in the front that was plastic, and it came with 2 plastic motor mounts, and it came with a plastic right side hub or left side hub. Both cars came with the Delta shock. Both cars were composite graphite. It's not really carbon fiber per se, but it's graphite material. It's not carbon fiber like you would think of today. This is 1989 technology. They did have woven carbon back then because the 10L was woven carbon. But anyways, the car did come with a 120 spur gear. Didn't come with a motor, no pinion gear, full bearings. Both cars were bearings, even the Sport. Both cars came with the TRC stock car wheels. The earliest versions, I think they all came with the stock car wheels, because the pre-production they run the old BBS when they were developing the car. Because the TRC Pro 10 came with BBS wheels, and then the Pro 10 Sport came out with these, because they come out with the Sport model of the Pro 10 after they come out with the Lynx. A little bit of TRC history, Composite Craft. It was a conglomeration of 2 companies. One of them, North Carolina, was TRC, and Composite Craft was in Florida. And there you go. That's what we got. Lynx II. We're going to tear into it. First thing we're going to do is get the tires off, and then pull the suspension off. This shock, as cool as it is, it's going away. We're going to run an upgraded shock. So that's our only real major upgrade that we're going to do, other than fresh tires, because I would love to run these wheels, but these tires are gone. So let's dig in. All right, first things first, we're going to pull the tires. What sold me on this car? I bought it on eBay. I got it for like 75 bucks. And what sold me on it, it was the fact that it still has the Delta shock. The shock mount's not cut, because normally when you change this, you have to cut that down. It doesn't have any excessive wear, like very little to none. The only thing that turned me off is the fact that they drilled holes here. These are not supposed to be here. The body mounts actually hold the sway bar down from the factory. This was done after the fact. No big deal. Since we're going to be a runner, we're not worried about the extra holes. It's not going to hurt us any. Didn't really add any flex to the chassis, so we're not going to worry about it. These cars did not have a Nerf wing from the factory. The later car with the LTO chassis, the left turn oval chassis, did have a Nerf wing attached back here, but the Elite never did. So your axle was just hanging out, and it was not uncommon to knock these axles out. And even back then, they were 35 bucks a piece, and it was an expensive crash. And people started buying titanium axles, thinking that was going to solve their problem, but they'd buy a $30 or $40 titanium axle, then hit the wall with that, and it wouldn't break, but it would be bent. And a bent axle might as well be broke. And these tires are done. But another selling point was these tires are not worn down at all. And the front end of this car with the no camber adjustment would tend to cone these tires out, and the fact that they still look square even though they're toasty means it wasn't run. If it was very little. A little tight. Still got the factory shims. This car came with different thickness. These are plastic or nylon shims. They were cone shaped to ride on the race of the bearing. They had one that was like paper thin. This was the middle, and then they had one a little bit thicker than that. And these graphite axles do tend to have a little bit of swelling when you tighten them up. And the instruction shows you to file a little notch for your set screw to hit. Evidently, these people, whoever owned this car, never did that, but they did sand on this axle because there's quite a bit of carbon dust right there. And they cut it off because the axle does come excessively long. It's almost as wide as the wheels. So they did cut off the excess of the axle. Not a big deal because you still got plenty on there. Just got to be careful putting it back on so you don't splinter it. I'll go ahead and leave that other shim on there because it's want to go back on where it came off, so I'm just going to leave it there. And whoever built this car did a really good job because the diff is silky smooth still. So we will get into that because we're going to polish this hub. Got to make the bling factor. And this may not be the most exciting video, folks, but it will be cool when it's all said and done. This is the prelude to coolness. Tiny pinion gear. I'm going to pull this motor. This motor is actually the first motor. My brother bought the first pan car that I raced when he got out of the military. And he thought he was going to go racing, but he never did. And I ended up with this car. It was a 10L. And we bought a Joel Johnson stock motor, 27 turn. It was pretty fast for its time. Wasn't the fastest motor. Just like anything back then, you had to buy 3 or 4 of them to get a good one, or you had to buy multiples. Or you had to know how to tune them up. Still has the brush heat sinks on it. The motor looks really fresh. And typical, you had to solder your capacitors on there to save you from radio interference on the old 75 megahertz days, or 72, well, 75. Associated style motor plug. Never ran those even back then. We just ran direct wire. But it's cool. Little timepiece right there. We may end up running that. Why not? It'll run breakout speeds. And just like a lot of pan cars these days still incorporates these ride height adjusters. Is determine your axle height, up, down. Let's see what else we got going on here. Let's go ahead and pull this servo out. This servo, thankfully, they didn't re-drill the chassis for this because this chassis is drilled for mini servos, like a, I guess like a 9650 you'd run today. But they had stuffed a full-size standard servo in here. And a lot of people had a tendency to drill the holes out in the chassis. And yeah, that's the S148 standard servo. Probably works fine, but it is old technology, so we will upgrade the servo. And it's a little big. You got 2 sets of holes. That's factory. That's for your different wheelbase or wheel length, because you had adjustable wheel length here. That's in the shortest position, and you move it up to the next one. It's going to move the front end up and give you a little bit more length. Same deal with the rear. On the rear pod, you had adjustable wheelbase with right now it's set in the longest position in the rear, and if you flip these blocks around, you got a shorter distance between the pin and the end of the block, and that brings the pod in. So all right, we're going to take the front end off. If you notice, there's 2 different screws. This one here is just a kind of a pillow block. It just kind of rides on it. This side is the adjuster for your caster. And this aluminum, you would not want aluminum screw in it because it cinches. And when it cinches, it kind of, I guess the threads would get kind of out of the line. And if you put aluminum in there and you cinch it down one time, natural thread lock. It's going to bind together, and it's going to, you're going to break the screw off trying to get it out. Unless you're really lucky and it just happens to come out, but chances are you're going to break a screw. At the very least, you're going to strip it. And it's tight. Now imagine trying to do that with an aluminum screw and an aluminum block. You would, for sure, just bought a new front end or a new block anyways. Yeah, that screw got warm, just take it out. And that's a steel screw. All right, there's pretty much the complexity of your front end. And that front end being all kind of gray and crusty. These beams, unlike the Pro 10 and some of the other cars back then, this beam is made out of magnesium. You can sand and polish it and make it look like chrome, which we will do that, but it don't last. So it's something you got to constantly upkeep. All the cars I got in my collection in there is almost like upkeeping real cars. You got to constantly go back and repolish all this magnesium because just from the humidity in the room, it will corrode. It's not going to rust through like you think, like steel, but it just gets crusty and kind of nasty looking, turns black. There's a little bit of sample of the smoothness right there where that clamp's been for 20 plus years. Another thing with this front end, these are trailing arm steering blocks. Later on, they did offer as an option. They never came in the car. They came in a Speedway kit, was the inline steering blocks. Let's see if you ever noticed the Lynx with the full size, like a diff nut, like an 832 nut holding the wheel on, like the same nut that's on top of the Kingpin. They ran an aluminum axle in order to get around this Kingpin, which is 3/16 versus an eighth. They had to cut quite a bit of material away from the axle, so you had to run a larger diameter axle, so you run larger bearings. These are 1/8 bearings. So you had to run different bearings with the optional steering blocks, and it put you on center with the Kingpin. A lot of people did it, made the car a little more predictable. Some people think it might have tightened the car up a little bit, but I always like the on center, but we're going to run the old trailing arm because that's what we got. Of course, we'll have to clean it up. They are super gummed up. They don't even, if you push it up, it don't even come back down. So that's zero suspension right there. Adjustable turnbuckles, they did come with these. These were a TRC thing. They polish up nice. They're aluminum. And it came with associated ball ends. They came in the kit that way. A little bit of a pain to adjust. You had to get a little Allen key to run through the hole. You didn't have a wrench like a modern day turnbuckle. So they worked. They worked okay on a pan car because you had a lot more clearance, but on another like off-road car or something, it'd be a pain in the butt to get around all the suspension and shocks and such. Now, we'll go ahead and pull these body posts off. They came with white body post, which is, that's the remains of them right there. It came with like a 5" in the rear and a 3.5 in the front, something like that. Although these cars were marketed as an on-road car, well, actually the box art has this car set up as an oval car. But you wouldn't think of this as an oval car back in the day, or not today, by today's standards, because of the equal biased weight. But back then we did run 6-cell batteries, so we'd run, or modified run 7, so we'd run 5 and 1 or 5 and 2 in modified. So we did, until they came out with the LTO chassis, it ran all 6 cells on one side. We tended to run 5 and 1. The modified cars, back when they come out with the 6-cell chassis, you had to run one on top. You had to stack them up because there was no slots over here. There's just a little tray for your speed control. We'll go ahead and get the rest of these body posts off, what's left of them. It's just they used it as a nut for some reason. I guess it's kind of ingenious. If you didn't have a nut, you could just chop your body post down. Sway bar. The sway bar was your left to right weight bias. That's how you could adjust your wedge on the rear of the car. And a lot of us ran, it came with like an 078. This is kind of small wire. If you wanted to tighten the car up, or actually wanted to make the car turn a little bit better, you'd run a thicker sway bar. You can run a 90 thousandths, but if you did, you had to drill these rod ends down because they were not, they were too small. So you had to open them up for the 90 thousandths. And I tended to run mine kind of loose because I like my car tight. I like to make it plant the rear to make it steer kind of situation. And it wasn't always the fastest way, but this car, I have run some of these Lynxes recently, and compared to modern pan cars, they are a lot tight. They don't turn real good. Even my modernized car over here, which is a Lynx base car, it's perfect for breakout, but it would never compete with today's cars in corner speed, because corner speed is where it's at with the new cars. All right, we're getting bare bones now. This car did come with wing mounts. These are the factory wing mounts. They come with plastic. The TRC Pro 10 did come with aluminum. The TRC Pro 10 had 832 screws in them. These are just 440, and they screw to the top of the pod. Wings were a must, especially on concrete speedways. That puts the weight right on the pod and right to the rear tires, versus like the modern cars were running the wings on the bodies. Yeah, there you go, right on the rear pod. All right, we're going to pull this shock off, and it is held in with E-clips and one set screw. Hopefully we don't shoot this E-clip across the room. There's a set screw in the end of the shock. You can see right there. And this pin just slides through, and the E-clip or the set screw locks it in place. I'll be surprised if this pin comes out without a fight, because as crusty as the screw is. Check that out. A little aluminum galvanic corrosion going on right there. All right, we're not gonna mess with that one quite yet, because I don't want to feel like stabbing myself with the screwdriver or the E-clip removed. Again, it's an aluminum pin, but on this side, it's going through plastic, so no corrosion. We may leave that shock to the end. We'll go ahead and pull the shock mount off. These screws are still brand new. Look at there. If you look at some of the old racers, before aluminum hardware was a common thing, they would actually take these screws and put them on a lathe and turn the heads down. That way they fit even more flush, and they would take a couple thousandths of a gram off. And I guess it all adds up eventually. These cars tended to be a little heavy because they did have this kind of overly complex rear suspension. Go ahead and get these upper links off. It works like a 3-link. Well, it is a 3-link. You got a lower control arm on a pivot point. You got your upper links that keep your wheelbase right. You could put a slight touch of rear steer in this car, but it acted weird if you got just the slightest little bit off. So it is best to keep your rear square as possible. And you could check the squareness when the car is flat on the ground in the links. You could put a straight edge across the bottom of the chassis and into the pod. Because if that link was too short, your pod's up. If that link was too long, your pod's tilted down. I'm sure everybody's got a different setup that ran these cars back in the day. So if you're watching this, throw me some tips. But we always tended to run them as straight as possible and as flat as possible. They came with the same style turnbuckle as the front, but they're made out of steel instead of aluminum, because I imagine aluminum that small would probably break on a rear collision. And these are Dubros from the factory. These are not Dubro balls on the inside, but the ball link itself is a Dubro heavy duty. That came with the kit. Shout out to Dubro for giving us a shout out on our lowrider build. Again, if you hadn't seen that video, go check it out. All right, let's get the rear A-arm off, and then we'll try to get this shock pin out. I'm gonna probably have to grab that with some side cutters or something, get it turning a little bit. Try not to damage it, but we're not going to reuse that anyway, so if we do, it's no major loss. All right, last screw here, and the rear pod will be separated from the chassis. All right, there's our main chassis. Down to nothing. There's your rear suspension setup with your A-arm and your floating pod. This side was aluminum. This side was plastic. On the Lynx Sport, you got a plastic on both sides. A lot of the racers back then were worried about precision machining versus molded part. So a lot of guys would buy another extra motor mount and they run aluminum on both sides just for the tolerances, thinking that it might be a little more precise. I've never had an issue with these not lining up perfectly, but you could. All right, we're going to pull the boomerang off. Later on the LTO version, they did come with one that had wings off the side. And that was the fact that the narrow bodies, the posts were too far apart, so they mounted the body off of this rear post. It would run out and around, and your body post would come off of it, and they'd be a lot narrower than they are on this chassis. They'd probably be about the equal of where these holes are that they drilled in this chassis. All right, we're about to tear this rear pod apart. Go ahead and pull this out. All right, there's the difference. And then one side had a hole in it. And that was a left and a right type thing. And this way, if you move this pin, see the distance between here and here is probably about an 1/8 inch difference, if that. And that would actually push it out and make your wheelbase longer. This one pulls your A-arm in and shortens the wheelbase. So this car was built in the shortest wheelbase. And that was probably be recommended for short tracks and or road course racing would be the short wheelbase. Or a high bike situation. But on super speedways, big tracks, longer is better. Especially some of the bumpier concrete that we ran back in the day. You've seen that older video I put up from Mid-Carolina. It's kind of a really grainy video because it's an old VHS, but that track was notoriously bumpy, but we all had it. We all had to deal with it, and it was a blast, and I miss it. All right, there's your rear A-arm. Rides on a pivot ball, a single pivot ball that's very similar to what we run with a T-plate car now. It's captured in this little housing, and that's another telltale sign of this car not being really run because we'd always cut these screws off. They were excessively long, but later on, I don't know if it was an earlier design thing that this didn't release, but later on they did come out with a pod dampener that would bolt in these 4 screws, and you'd need that length to bolt on your side-to-side dampening. You had that, or you had a swizzle stick, which was just a tube full of silicone grease that would dampen the side-to-side action, since we didn't have side shocks. That old Delta shock, these things here are probably the worst, in my opinion, to build. They're very difficult to make them feel good. This one don't feel bad, but it don't feel like it has anything in it. It just feels like a spring. So we are not going to run that, even though it is pristine and stock. And we probably could run it because running on carpet, the track's relatively smooth. So a super silky smooth shock may not be a huge advantage just because the track's smooth. But when we're running on concrete, that's the first thing had to go. Never even built the car with that shock on it myself. We just immediately switched to a Kyosho Gold or the Trinity Purple shock. There's your top plate. There's your wing mounts. Another good place to not put aluminum screws is in this motor mount. You get them a little bit sideways and she's toast. Motor mount. This will polish up nice. We'll sand it, make it chrome. And that's the plastic one. It's actually just by feeling it by hand, it's as thick as this plastic is, the nylon, it's about as heavy as the aluminum one. They did offer these later on. They did offer these in colors. You can get them from blue, green, neon pink, neon yellow. They were kind of rare parts. There were few and far between, and I actually sent some out to the guy in the UK, and he's enjoying those colored parts right now, I believe. This pod plate. This chassis went through a lot of different designs. They come out with one called a ground effects that had a kick up. It had a spur gear protector on one side. It was all carbon or composite material. They come out with the ground effects chassis, which come all the way out to the body. They had a ground effects LTO chassis, which basically it was like this. It had 12 slots in it instead of 5 and 5. It had 6 and 6. They actually come out with this chassis with 6 slots in it, a little bit longer. Just come out the length here and added that 6th slot. So there was a lot of different versions through the years. The suspension never changed. The front end got a couple of upgrades. They did come out with a adjustable camber, not just caster. So there really wasn't a whole lot of changes before they discontinued the car. That front end never came on the car, the adjustable camber one. It was an optional part. I don't think it came on the SS car. Even on the SS car, you ran the same pod. It just had narrower hubs. You had a really stumpy hub on the left side, and it had a TRC Pro 10 or a Bowlink style hub on the right side. That's why that axle has that barrel, because this is basically a Bowlink axle, and it ran the short, stubby 1-inch right hub, and that would narrow the car enough to put a narrow body on it. Alright guys, here's a basic teardown, exploded view of the car. Very simple build. Pretty much build these cars with my eyes closed at this point. We will go through, I'll probably replace these turnbuckles with titanium. I may put aluminum screws where it's plastic. Screw into plastic, not screw into metal. Anywhere metal and metal go together, I'm putting steel screws. I don't want to put steel on aluminum. I don't want to pinch them off. And we will race this car. We're going to run it in breakout oval. We got a body ready, 89 T-Bird. We are going to throw a Chris Dosek style paint job. If you remember his paint jobs from back in the day, he had a lot of 16th inch fine line clear pinstripes. It was kind of funny because back in the day, I believe he got outlawed for running those stripes. They wanted to roar, didn't approve it. For some reason, they thought it wouldn't scale. And everybody thought it was a trick move to save weight, to not put paint in the pinstripes. But his cars were always inspiring. He had some to do. I don't know all the true backstory of all the design of this car, but I believe Chris Dosek was one of the designers that helped build this car. At least was one of the test drivers. And I know he ran this front end, not this particular front end, but the split beam. I know he ran it even on his 10Ls when he was running for Associated, which is pretty cool. He had a really cool looking car back in the day. Seemed like we had a lot more freedom for modifications back then, at least more creativity, individuality. Everybody's cars were pretty sweet with the machine screws and taking this basic kit and then polishing it and shaving things and machining things and cut these hubs down to make them lightweight, because nothing like we have today. But those were the years, and I'm old. Stay tuned. Subscribe for the next episode. We will be cleaning all this stuff up. I'm not going to show you every step of the way of cleaning it up. We'll get it thrown together. We're going to throw pretty basic electronics in it because we don't have to get so fast. We're running breakout. And we might throw that motor in it. Who knows? We'll see. Trying to keep this super low budget and trying to keep it as stock as possible, because I don't want to try to modify it, because I already got one of those. That's what that is. That's super modified Lynx over there. So we're going to try to keep this as retro as possible and race it against the new cars and see how we do. Alright guys, that's a wrap for today's video. May not be the most exciting or most informative, but some of y'all may find it interesting. Part 2 is going to be a lot more interesting once we get it back together and get some paint on it. If you're interested in some of the old pan car stuff, I got Rig Rundown. I got several episodes of that. Each one of these cars has a story, and I was a little less, a lot more camera shy back then, but still some pretty cool videos, I think, of explaining some of the history of these cars and the cars that mean so much to me. So if you want to, go back and check those out. Those are some of the first videos we done when we first started redoing the channel. I have been on YouTube for 14, 15 years now. And the first several years, probably the first 13, 14 years, because we only been really pushing it for a year. The first 13 years were just old race videos and some family stuff, stuff I just put on there just to play with YouTube. But I'm leaving them all there from now on, so you can go back 15 years ago from when we first started the channel if you really want to dig deep. So anyways, I appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for lots of mini truck stuff with the big truck over here. That one. We will be in Maggie Valley for from Thursday to Sunday, and we'll be filming with the camera or the phone, and we'll be filming with the GoPro, so we're going to have lots of footage from that. And stay tuned, subscribe to that. We're all over the place. It's whatever I find interesting. Looks like the description of the channel says. We do mini trucks, RC cars, racing, family traveling things, so whatever. So we're not about consistency like they want you to be on YouTube. We're all over the place. So if you like this week's, you may not like next week's. So anyways, that's enough babbling. We'll see you, what day is it? Sunday. We'll see you Sunday. Thanks.